Thanks, Lark. All right. So, Douglas, thank you for meeting with me. I'm excited to hear more about the work that you're doing. From what I've read about the farm, it sounds like a pretty cool place to be. So, I'm looking forward to it.
Good
Um,
deal.
yeah, my first question, I did a little bit of research just to prepare for this call. And
Good.
my first question is, um, what got you personally involved in intentional community?
Well, I'm part of the 70s, 60s, and 70s.
Mhm.
I bought the first issue of Mother Earth News magazine. My wife and I met in high school, and we got into becoming vegetarians together and learning about gardening and wanted to go back to the land. We'd kind of been involved in some of the anti Vietnam War efforts, and it just felt like the country elected Nixon, so it's time to find something else. So we started becoming more aware of the spiritual path, and that combined with getting closer to nature. We spent a summer camping after our wedding, and the farm was featured in the third issue of Mother Earth News magazine. And so that got our attention. We went out west in a VW van. We stayed at an ashram. We met Baba Ramdas. And then we decided to come back and get some land. And not too long after we gotten back to our home in Louisville, Kentucky, Stephen Gaskin, who was the founder of the farm and the Tennessee Farm Band, and an entourage came to Louisville to do a band gig. And then in the middle, they would stop and he did a slideshow about the farm. And
Mm.
so we were in Kentucky. The farm was in Tennessee. It was just down the road. So we thought, well, let's go check it out. My wife was interested in the midwifery. She had gotten pregnant, and although she had a miscarriage, she was still interested in having a child delivered by midwives, and had written to the farm asking about that. And so we came, and we were just blown away by how cool it was. It seemed like this is where the revolution was really happening. And so we went back and kind of thought about it some more. And we came back. My story is it differs from hers a little bit, but we came back a month later and asked Stephen Gaskin if we could move to the farm. And we were pretty young. We were both like 19.
Mm.
And he was like, "Well, do you have all your stuff?" And we're like, "No, we thought we should ask first." And he said, "Well, let me know when you're here with all your stuff and you're ready to do it." So we came back a month later in our van, had a place to live, all our stuff, and we actually lived on the farm for about 3 months and started making connections and moving other places. The motor pool confiscated our van and sold it. And before we actually met with Stephen again, and at that point, he was considered the spiritual teacher of the community, and you made an agreement with him to have him as your teacher. And so that was kind of the formal way people joined the farm back in those days. He remained the teacher here for about the first, it was really in 1983 that he was quote unquote dethroned. I think people got disillusioned with his leadership, somewhat before that. And, I give him credit for he stuck around after he was made a citizen like everybody else, and ran for the membership committee. And I served on the membership committee with him. I considered him a friend. We weren't close friends, but he was a friend, and kind of a cool guy. He had his shortcomings, and some were shorter than others.
Wow,
But
that's really
that's how
cool.
we got
So,
involved.
yeah, that's so cool that you started all of this when you were 19, getting into that. Um, so it sounds like you were pretty early on in the formation of this community of the farm. Do you know what year that was that you officially joined?
The buses landed in 71, and we came in August of 73.
Okay, got it. And have you taken any time away officially? Like have you left and come back, or have you remained with the community that entire time?
We have remained with the community. Now, after about a year and a half here, we'd had our first child. We went to live on a smaller farm. We had satellite communities in different states. And being 19, we were kind of not in charge of anything. We were kind of on the younger side. And we thought, well, if we go to this other community, we could be more involved in making decisions and take on more responsibility. And so we did that for 2 years. And then we had our second child back on the farm during that time, and then went back to the small farm, which was in Kentucky, which also put us closer to our folks and things. But after about 2 years, it just seemed like there was no work there. Uh, wasn't really going to go. We were kind of missing the action of the Tennessee farm, which probably was at about 600 or 700 by that point. I think it was around 400 to 500 when we arrived. And so we moved back to the farm. Most of the people on our, some of the people went up to a farm in New York. We did that for a couple of months, but it was too cold, and we wanted to be in Tennessee. So we were on the farm for maybe another year and a half or 2 years. I'd have to look. But then we went to Guatemala as a volunteer with Plenty International. The farm had sent people down in 1976 after an earthquake to do disaster relief, which took many different forms. And then so we went down with kind of the second wave in 78. I went down as a radio technician. We used ham radio to communicate with our farms around the country, and then it became an integral role in Guatemala. I talked back to Tennessee every day, usually several hours a day, coordinating, delivery of supplies and people going back and forth, all kinds of things. And my wife had become a lab technician, so she had skills. And she was testing our water to make sure our water purification was working properly. She could check people's stool samples to make sure, to see if we picked up parasites, all kinds of parasites down there. And so that was her job. So we were like a good combo.
That's
And
amazing. Yeah, that's such a cool opportunity to have
yeah,
through.
it was definitely what I would call a peak life experience, living with the Mayan people. They were just so beautiful. We could see 5 volcanoes from our home, overlooking Lake Atitlan, one of the largest high altitude lakes in the world. And but at the end of sometime in 1980, Reagan got elected, and that's when the death squads started. And so they were killing hundreds of people, massacring whole villages. Uh, One of our engineers, who was a Guatemalan man for our water projects, went home, and his neighbors said the death squads were here looking for you, because anybody who was trying to help the poor was considered a communist. And so he came back to us. We gave him some money for his family to relocate, and we felt like we were endangering our Mayan friends by our presence down there. And it was a little while before they started actually attacking Americans, but they did, start kidnapping nuns and things like that. And we were down there with our kids. Our kids were 2 and 4 when we went down. They were 4 and 6 when we came back, and a lot of us had our children with us down there, and it just felt like time to leave. And we were able to keep the projects going by hiring local Guatemalans to keep going on the work. We really didn't have to be down there as a bunch of gringos to accomplish our work. And so we came back to Tennessee. That was in 1980, fall of 1980. And then we've pretty much been on the farm. We went to Belize for 7 months in 2000. My wife, Deborah, was doing a women's health and midwifery skills program. She went down thinking she was going to teach midwifery, and as we got to know the women, we found out they really needed just basic women's health information and education. And so we did that and came back. She went back one more time for like 6 weeks to do an additional class. But we've pretty much been here since then. You know, I had started a business doing video production. It started out as satellite TV installation back in the 80s. And then I moved into video production in the 90s and then into internet, web design in the 2000s. And then I kind of was getting bored with commercial work. So I started doing retreats about living in community, sustainability, growing your own food, and did that for about 20 some years. And then in more recent years, towards my retirement, I discovered this music spiritual practice called Dances of Universal Peace that was born in San Francisco at the same time as the farm. And I'm now on the board of directors of that, where we have people doing these peace dances all over the world. Thousands of people are involved, and it's a real beautiful practice. And so that's kind of our current life. We are leaving on Tuesday for a dance camp in Mexico. Back in November, December, we were in Asia for 6 weeks, with dancing with people in Taiwan, Indonesia, Thailand. We met 250 people from all across Southeast Asia that are being trained in how to lead these dances. So just kind of my own personal spin-off on, I have a dance group here of about 30 that gets together every Sunday.
That's so cool. Yeah, when I was looking through all the things that you offer, it just felt like it was like checking the boxes of everything I'm interested in, and like the midwifery program and all of that is just really cool and feels um maybe unique to have that many well-established programs in one place. Um yeah, thank you for sharing. I would love to hear more about what the governance style is of the farm and what kind of that system that you've created looks like.
Basically, in 1983, we had what we call the changeover, which is where we changed from a communal economy to more of a cooperative, where each adult member is required to pay a monthly dues to cover all of our operating costs. And we determine that through an annual vote. Most of the costs are fixed pretty much from year to year, but people can make new proposals, or we may have to buy a new piece of equipment or something as far as what the budget is. And so as part of the changeover, we changed from a monastery designation, 501D, which means everyone shares income, to a standard corporation. We wanted to do that fairly quickly so it wouldn't raise any eyebrows with the IRS, and have something very straightforward. And so rather than make the community a nonprofit, we have many nonprofits within the community. But the community is run as a corporation, and so it has a board of directors that are elected to 3-year terms. And they manage our finances and oversee big community projects, building maintenance, road construction. Our water system is the largest thing on our budget because we have to have a licensed water manager that sends samples into the state every week. And, it's his salary that puts it up there as one of our largest expenses. We also have a membership committee that's elected to 3-year terms. I would say most people run for more than one term just for the continuity. It may take you a couple of years before you feel like you've gotten into your stride and know what's going on, so you do another term. And so they manage new people coming in, and as well as internal disputes. If it's the right type of dispute, we have a mediation committee, and people that, first we encourage people to just talk one-on-one, and if that doesn't work, we encourage them to talk 2-on-2, like bring a friend. Occasionally something is a harder, the feelings are hurt more, and it might take some professional mediators to help them sort that out, and we have those. And so that's how But that's key to survival in the community, in life and community, is knowing how to work it out and resolve differences. And we are a large enough community so that most of those disagreements or stepping on somebody's toes or something just affects a few people. And, even larger issues may still affect, a key group of just a few people. And then they have their group, their friends on either side. Uh, and so then the other 150 just sit back and watch, or something. We can absorb a lot. And we've been through enough things that we see that things cycle. And there's kind of like maybe a drama, and then everything settles back down. And then maybe a year later, there's another drama. And, you just learn to accept and absorb those kind of things. So our annual budget, I think right now is a little over a couple 100,000. Roads are costly to maintain. We decided at the time of the changeover to keep our gate at the front of our property. The county would have come in and paved all our roads for us, but then they would be public roads. And we decided we'd rather have a gate that closes at night so that we don't have drunk yahoos cruising the roads, make people feel more safe.
Oh, sounds like a village that you've created. A
It's
very
really more of a village these days. An intentional community is here, because we set an intention, to be here. And we were founded as a spiritual community, but we were always very leery of putting things in writing or giving things names. We don't want to get locked into any kind of dogma. And in fact, part of the changeover was that some of our agreements had turned into things like dogma, and we didn't have as much freedom as we wanted, as we had after the change. But people live their own lives. They have their own jobs. There's companies within the community that employ people. We have an electronics manufacturing firm that employs usually around 20 to 25 people. They make Geiger counters. That's something that we started after the nuclear disaster at 3 Mile Island. And then they've been sold all over the world, especially after Chernobyl and Fukushima. So that's our largest, most successful business. It is privately owned, and some of the people, I guess, in executive positions have shares in the company, and then they have employees. We have a book publishing company that's owned by the community. It's kind of shrunk over the years. People aren't buying as many books. It mainly specializes in cookbooks and books about health. It also has a catalog of Native American authors from our work with Plenty International. I'm going to go grab a glass of water.
Absolutely, yeah. Take your time.
Thank you.
Of course. Um, I'm curious to hear more about specifically the bigger pain points or bigger cycles that you've noticed that feel like they need that beyond the one-on-one or the two-on-two conflict resolution. Do you have an example of something that's happened recently or something that stands out to you of needing like deeper intervention and how that was handled?
I don't have any good examples. I have a bad example, but I'm not going to use that. Very seldom does it get to involve the whole community. Here's one. We have a dome by the store that was uncovered, unfinished from built during the old days, and we came up with an idea to put some canvas on it to see how that would work, And so there were a lot of big trees around the dome, And the heavy equipment operator also noticed that we were having a lot more drainage issues after having put the canvas on, and he wanted to put some ditches that would channel the water. And he had this limited window when he was available before his summer contracts came in. And I was the manager at the time, and he said, I got this a week right now. Do you want to do this right now? And I had notified a number of people and sent letters to the board and said, we want to take these trees out in order to do this project. But I hadn't actually been to a board meeting, and I gave him the go ahead. He contacted the sawyer. Next thing you know, there's like 6 big trees dropped down, and the community at large didn't know about it and weren't prepared for it. And it was very shocking, and I got in big trouble. I got yelled at quite a bit.
Yeah, I can see that kind of shaking things up a bit.
Yeah.
Um, was there then intervention that came in to speak with you or the community at large? What was
As I
the
recall, we had like a community meeting where I had to sit and take it. There was another incident where there was a family that there was young people that had been divorced, and they were kind of bitter and weren't letting the grandfathers see the grandkids, and they were at a public event off the farm, a school game, and they kind of blew up at each other, and it created a big, it was ugly. And so there was some meetings to talk about that, and it took a couple of meetings just to get the guy everything chilled out enough that he didn't have to leave. And it's interesting to watch that a lot of over the course of the next 15 years, those young kids that he was having trouble seeing are now his business partners. He's a
wow.
contractor, and they're running the business as he gets older. So that's part of the benefit we have of being a 50-year-old community is watching things evolve and change and heal. And I have a saying that I share with people that time wounds, all heals.
I like that.
Nobody gets out without having their heart broken or dealing with pain in their life. But if we're good to each other and we take care of each other, we have dear friends, we come around.
Yeah. Yeah, that I love that. Do you have I guess do you have an insight into the board that works with letting new people in and kind of figuring out who's going to be a good fit for the farm? Is there a method
It's
to that?
really a pretty complex process compared to maybe other communities, but it takes several years to join the community. So first, someone would become a visitor or an extended visitor, which basically means we've acknowledged that they're going to live on the property for a while, and they have to have a sponsor. So that means you pretty much need to have visited enough that you made friends with somebody enough that they're willing to be your sponsor. And the sponsor kind of is responsible for guiding you, so that if you have any social faux pas that happen, they will talk to you about that, explain things. Ideally, they're helping you before that happens to know what kind of things to do. And then we're watching over the next year, they would maybe move from a visitor to becoming a resident. So a resident is you're not just visiting, you're actually living here. And again, you still have a sponsor. And so we watch and see, do you pay your bills on time? Or are you very flaky? Do you show up when you say you're going to? Do you participate in community work events? Do you attend our meetings? How interested are you in the community, and how much are you looking for a cheap place to rent? We're really not interested in just collecting more rent, because every person you bring in affects what we call the group head, the group mind. They contribute to the flavor of the community, and it only takes a few people to sour the mix and create conflict. And generally speaking, one of the things that can hold people back is work. Maybe sometimes people are overly skilled and can't find work in our rural area. There's not a lot of work until you get up, to about 50 miles away. And you didn't come here to commute like that. Actually a handyman or, the entry level stuff can be a good way to somebody get their foot in the door, because most people who are any good are employed somewhere. There's not a lot of just, hey, could you come work in my garden, or can you help me clean my house for a day? Or somebody might start a cleaning business, helping people who are too busy. Maybe they're in the medical field or something, and they'd rather just pay somebody to clean their house. So people can come in at all different levels. There's not a lot of empty housing. And as you can know these days, even a basic house, a tiny home is like 50 grand these days. Some years ago you could pull it off for, 10, 15, 25. It's getting harder to do that. And so and one of the things that's worth noting is that the land is all held in a trust for the beneficiaries, for the benefit of the beneficiaries who are the members of the foundation corporation. So when you join the community after becoming a resident, you apply to become a provisional member. And that status may go on for another year or two or more. A provisional member can build or buy a home, but so the homes can only be sold to new members that returning, provisional members. So there's really a small number of people that you can sell a home to. And if you're talking like you've got $200,000 in a home and you decide you want to leave for some reason, finding somebody with $200,000 in cash, because the banks will not finance you, because they cannot repossess the house and put it on the open market, because it's part of a trust. The house, once it's attached to the land, is part of the trust. You don't actually own it. We do have a system where we recognize that you have the equity in this invested in your home, and that more or less determines what your asking price is. Most homes have sold eventually, but it doesn't happen real often, but occasionally somebody has to leave for one reason or another. And they have been able to sell. But anyway, so then once you've been a provisional member, you would run to become a full member. And it takes 75% of the community to vote you in as a full member. If you don't get your 75%, it doesn't mean you have to leave. It just means there are people who don't feel comfortable voting for you. And you might have a pretty good idea who that is. Did you offend somebody, or did some of your actions push people's buttons and make them just not comfortable? And so how can you reach those people, talk to them, get straight in order to get your 75%? At that point, you're asked to pay a $3,000 joining fee, what we call a membership fee. And that goes into our development fund for running water to new locations, for developing new sites, maybe a new road into that site. Different things happen with that development fund. And so your money goes in there, and then you become a permanent member. When you're voted in, you're a full member. When you've paid your $3,000, you're a permanent member, which means you can come and go, maintain a house here. You're asked to pay one person's minimum dues to maintain the house on the property. But say you want to go take care of an aging parent, you could leave the home here, rent it to somebody. And so that's some of the benefits of becoming a permanent member. You can't vote on the board of directors until you become a full member. Provisional members don't vote. So there's a few privileges to becoming, a full member like that.
Absolutely. Um, I had a question for you going back here a bit. If someone wanted to sell something, a structure, a home that they had built themselves and kind of own within the community, you mentioned it might be hard to find someone that's able to pay for it or take over, whatever that may be. What would happen if someone was looking to either sell or leave the community and they're not able to find someone to fill that, I guess, gap, or how does that look?
Usually they stay until they do,
Hmm.
or they would turn it into a rental. And we need rentals because the provisional members and the residents that are coming in need a place to rent so they can live here. And once someone transitions from becoming a resident to a provisional member, they're not necessarily just ready to start building a house. That's going to take some time. But what I've been seeing is that some of the ideal demographic of people coming in are the 50 to 60-year-olds who have established a career, maybe ideally bought a house out there in the real world, and then they can sell it, what's called cash out, and then they have money to buy a new home when they get here or build. It's harder for a young family. We do encourage young families, and they find a way here and there, but it's harder for them because they don't have savings, especially in this day and time. It's harder to build up a big nest egg. And to move here, you have to have, rent money for a while before you get established in employment. Just moving costs a lot of money. Sometimes it's our kids who were born here, grew up here, left, established lives in other places, and then decide they want to move back. Whether it's when they start having kids, we're seeing some that are now hitting their early 60s that are moving back. And they understand what they're getting themselves into. Because we've been doing this speak the truth, work it out with each other system for 50 years, we can be a little blunt sometimes about saying what we see. And, most people are not that used to people confronting them about their faults, and things that they need to change. And it can be shocking to people. We try
Yeah.
to be nice about it, but
Yeah,
once
I
our
mean, I
young
think that's
people have experienced that, they know what they're getting into.
exactly. Yeah, and that's something that seems to me potentially sort of a make or break of something like this is that you need to be able to say the things that might, not always be comfortable or want to be said for things to work.
One thing I tell people is that, you're living here and you see one of our dramas go down. And did that freak you out enough that you're just like, these people are crazy, I'm leaving? But maybe you made it through that. What happens when you're at the center of that drama? Can you survive that? Of course, it makes a difference if how when that drama comes. If you've already invested in a home, you can't just pick up and leave. You kind of have to stay and work it out.
Yeah. I see a lot of value in doing having it that be that way as well. Um,
If you change your mind, we're not buying you out. If you put 200,000, 300,000 into a house on the land and you change your mind, you're going to have to just wait until somebody comes along. So we want people to be really sure. That's one of the reasons it takes several years before you're allowed to build.
yeah, that's smart. Um, when you were talking before about some of the jobs that people will have, um, are there a lot of people that work on the property within the farm? And are they being paid a stipend, or how does that all work for people that maybe don't work off the farm, but still, how are they making money? How is that working?
Well, I would say that there's been a percentage of people who do medical work: nurses, doctors, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, and they're working in clinics, hospitals, etc. Then there's people who do construction work. One of the things about construction work is it can't be outsourced to another country. Depending on the work, it might be susceptible to immigrant people working. As like you see a lot of the roofing work these days is done by people who will work for less. But generally speaking, our contractors and our professional builders and remodelers often do some of the best financially. Okay, so then there's the internal businesses, and they pay their people a range of wages. The community only pays a few people. We have someone that's staffed at the Welcome Center, and she gets an annual salary, kind of a part-time salary. She's up there like 6 hours a day. We have a bookkeeper who's not full-time doing that. We have a manager, a couple of different manager positions that are, again, part-time. And then there's the people who are like the newer people that are doing, odds and ends work. And, like you can do a cleaning service and charge 25 an hour. You don't necessarily work 8 hours a day, but you could at least be doing better than minimum wage.
Absolutely. Um, is so with the monthly dues, all of that is going towards things like maintenance and developing things and kind of taking care of the property. Um, how many directors are on that board? And again, that's something it sounds like you vote to get onto, and then once you're on it, you serve your term, and then you can be reelected. Is that the way that that works?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And there's 7 people on the board. That way you have a tiebreaker. We try to reach consensus in small groups, small committees, and then we'll just use a standard majority vote for big decisions or approving the budget or electing board members or membership committee members.
Have there been strategies with creating the different boards or sort of organizing this governance style that haven't worked very well that you've phased out over time?
No, we pretty much, I think we could be trying more things out just from my own personal observation, the sociocracy and things. But generally speaking, we've had the board since 1983. And, I have to say we're still here.
What's something that you personally would like to try or done maybe a bit differently?
I'm retired from farm public life. I was the manager for 8 years. I served 6 years on the board, 4 years of membership, and I guess it was maybe about 10, 11 years ago, I retired from being the manager and was a little burnt out and just wanted to go in a different direction. And that's when I started doing the dance practice and kind of following my passion. We're in this interesting transition now where the founding members are still in the majority. And, so we're in our 70s, and some of us are hitting our 80s. And so the next generation is taking on more of the responsibility of running the place, positions on our board. The board is still split with first and second generation members. And I have to say that us first generation founders have a certain drive and let's get this done that we don't see quite as much in the younger people. And so like during this ice storm, some of our first generation older guys were carrying the mail on cutting trees and getting people fixed up. Fortunately, we did see some Some of the next gen picking it up and really doing a good thing. We for the very first time we purchased a road grader, a snowplow, before we knew this was coming. So one of our members just bought one, and then another one of our younger members donated a piece of equipment that it would attach to, and then another younger guy drove it for hours and hours in the cold. And just people did pitch in and help each other out. But so that's it's going to be over the next 20 years for sure. Most of my generation is going to be gone, and it's challenging to bring in new people and have them stick. Partly, for some of the reasons I mentioned, and just because it's challenging, and but you need enough people to form that base amount of income to support the community, so that the monthly dues is not too big a strain on people's pocketbooks. We have an amazingly low amount of $112 per adult. You can live in a condo and be spending, $400 plus your water bill and, lots of things. So, that 112 includes our water, our trash pickup, our recycling center, lifeguards at the swimming hole in the summertime, maintaining, 15 miles of roads, improving the roads, slowly paving the roads. I'd say about 3/4 of our roads are paved, but you find that only lasts so long, and then they need a second layer or a third layer. It's ongoing. So it will be more of a challenge. Then there's like taxes. Our land taxes are very, very low, and each individual pays their house taxes, but they range usually from $500 to $1,500 a year. They're not like you see in California or up on the East Coast. They're fairly reasonable, but those costs, paying the land taxes, paying the insurance, paying for the water system, will fall on a smaller and smaller number of people as our generation ages out. And so the challenge for the next generation is how to attract people. We generally have about 10 new people joining the community or going through the membership process at any one time. It might be a little more right now, like 10 to 20. But, if there's over 70 of us that are founding members, that's a lot to replace.
Wow, that's a big staple in the community to have so many founding members. Um, what do you think would be the lowest population to keep costs low, keep things affordable, but still keep things running smoothly? Do you have an estimate on that?
Well, right now we have about 150 people who are dues payers, and we're paying $112 a month. That's $225 for my wife and I. So you could half that number and be paying, $500 a month, and compared to life in the city, it'd be affordable for a lot of people, particularly if you have advanced your skills up to some kind of professional level.
Yeah.
I do encourage people to develop your skills. Don't be, because some people want to live kind of a subsistence lifestyle, and they've been able to pull it off when we have enough other people carrying, with higher incomes, and enough of us here to keep the cost of living here low. That may be harder in the future. As far as paying our taxes and insurance, a couple of good high-paid lawyers could cover that, with the money they bring in, a few professionals. So it may turn into more something like that. We have a big festival coming up in April. It's not a big festival. It's limited to 500 people. but it's mostly young people, and it's kind of an introduction to the community and to see what possibilities are, and those kind of things could attract more young people. And we really don't do much recruitment, advertising. It's really more organic. You're called to be here. You find out about it, and I think they could be more aggressive as far as really trying to find people that would be a good fit.
I'm just gonna take a couple notes here. Yeah, that's all great.
I do have to say that I did an event called the Farm Experience Weekend twice a year for 20 years, and I still only got a smattering number of new members through that process.
Do you think that's the way that the event was marketed and created, or is it a generational thing maybe? Are you seeing a decline in people wanting to do this type of living compared to the 70s and 80s when it was a bit bigger?
Well, I think, for one thing, it's not that easy to move here. So it's a very small niche of people that fit in with the culture, have the money to make the move. We get contacted by people every day that said, I can't take it out here anymore. Can I move there?
Yeah.
But that's not going to do it. We wish it was easier, but the community. One of the things we've always wanted to keep the cost of living low for us here. So we're not building apartment buildings for new people to come move into. Like spending $500,000 or so to build transitional housing or new housing. If I was coming, I'd probably do a tiny home. We have kind of a pay-as-you-go system where you come in with your starter home and you save up your money, and then you do an addition, and then you do an addition on the addition, and do it out of your pocket. And that's kind of how it works for people here. And so that's what I would do if I was trying to move here right now.
Yeah, it seems like almost a double-edged sword to have this um intricate process of joining because, then it weeds out the people that aren't going to be serious and aren't going to be a good fit for it. But then, yeah, I can see why that would make it challenging to then find people that will continue to replace each generation as needed. Um,
It is for sure.
yeah. What advice would you have? It sounds like having sort of a tiny home to start and building up that way. But is there other advice that you would give to people that are interested, not in just the farm, but in either creating or joining in other intentional communities?
We're kind of at a low ebb right now as far as events. I retired from doing events, and one of the other people that was doing events is also retired from that. Um, I tried to get one of our younger people to pick up on the Farm Experience Weekend, and we did one last fall, but I still ended up doing most of the work, and I don't get the impression he's ready to start do another one. That was supposed to be his test to do it, because he approached me about wanting to do them. So we have a market day once a month, April through October, the second Saturday of the month. And that's just a nice event for people to come in and get a feel for a bunch of people. If you just come randomly, the farm is 1,700 acres. So where it's very quiet. We're all engaged in our personal lives. In the summer, you can see people walking or biking up and down the road, and we have one garden area that various people are working in, but otherwise it's hard for people to get a sense of what it's really like here. So by coming to a market day, I'd say maybe half the community shows up for that, as well as a large number of people from outside the community. But it's just, you hear there's live music, there's food trucks, it's a scene. So I would, so that's one way to just kind of get a feel. There's We have a nonprofit that has established a nature preserve around the community of another 1,400 acres. I was a part of that for a long time. And they host hikes and things. Some of them are within the preserve here, other times it's other places in the state. But if you looked at that calendar and maybe came for a weekend, there's some B&Bs where people can stay and meet people. Uh, I'm hosting one of my dance weekends also in April. And I find people will come to that because there's not other events for them to come to, and they have a good time.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how it's become easier to kind of trial some different things and see what different communities there are and get to experience that. It's really cool.
Mhm.
Um, I would love to go back a little bit in our conversation and just touch a little bit more on the committee that you have that does the conflict resolution. And I would like to hear more about what style or how the people on that board or in that committee are trained and what their, purpose is, what their intention is behind that.
Well, we brought mediation to Tennessee and brought it and got it into the court system. One of our people here was a strong lobbyist, and so she's part of that. And then there's a licensed psychologist that's part of that group. I would say mostly it's about listening, listening to the other person. And when you take the time to listen to the person that you've offended, and then for the person that's offended to listen to the offender, and a lot of times it's a misunderstanding or it's hurt feelings or overreacting, or sometimes it's people with anger issues and they're either recommended or told they need to go get some anger management, outside the community to see if they can get a handle on that. I've been involved on a couple of different mediations, either because I know the people or, I kind of have a steady personality and can be helpful in that way. And a lot of times it's just talking to the people and confronting them and forcing them to look at their self. And it's
Have
like,
you had an instance of someone that wasn't able or willing to have those conversations and look internally, or has that been addressed pretty consistently over the years?
no, the ones I know about have been successful.
Good. Um, yeah, I think that covers my question there. Do you have other things to share about any of
I,
that?
I wanted to give a shout out to the farm midwives.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the things we're most known for around the world. And for the last 30 years, it's been a significant revenue stream for the community, supporting, 5 or 6 people who are full-time midwives, my wife being one of them. They did workshops for a number of years. Now there is a college with a bachelor degree where women come in for in-person classes, maybe for 2 weeks, and then they go back home and work under a preceptor and a senior midwife, and they'll come here, usually a couple of times a year, and they can actually get a degree, and it's preparing them for the national licensing exam.
Wow, that's really cool. Hmm.
And so my wife was a midwife for 30 years. She finally retired, and that allowed us to do more traveling because she was always on call. Our daughter is now a midwife assistant. She has done some deliveries, but she's really not looking to take on that level of responsibility. But a couple of her friends have become midwives. And so she's, their support and helping them with like office management and that kind of thing. And now my granddaughter has just graduated. Well, she graduates in May from nursing school, and she's interested in midwifery. Whether she'll stay here or not remains to be seen. But she is showing an interest like that. And it's just brings a lot of heart to the community to have been a place where natural childbirth happens. It's such a beautiful spiritual experience. It affects people's lives deeply. And, we're honored to have it been part of the foundation of our community.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. That's something that I was really excited to interview you about to learn more about that. That's such a unique experience to have in this capacity. Do you have a clinic or like a hospital or anything like that on the land itself that you operate from, or are the people that are doing that work going to other communities or working nearby in those areas?
We have a clinic building that has exam rooms for prenatals. Occasionally, they'll go do the prenatal at someone's home. I'd say that's probably happening more these days that people are wanting home births. There are places within the community where someone can come and stay and have their baby in the community, different rentals.
Thank you. Um, all right, so I have a couple other questions for you, and I just want to check in on time. It looks like we're at about an hour. Do you have a bit longer to chat?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else I'm going to try to accomplish today.
Okay. I want to circle back a bit to going from the original founder's idea and kind of when that change crossed over. You mentioned something about there being like a disillusionment experience for people that then had left. Can you speak more about what that looked like and what that was?
Well, like I said, Stephen Gaskin was the founder. He was a college professor in California who lost his job when he became a hippie. And so then he started just being a teacher, not for money. And people started exploring spirituality and finding that all religions share essential truths that we wanted to build our path on. And so when we got here, he was kind of like, he was the teacher. I considered him like the preacher. He would do a talk every Sunday. But he didn't keep a tight hand on things, but you also knew that, kind of the buck stopped with him. And, power, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And he got too much ego, just became too much about himself. And meanwhile, we had all signed a vow of poverty in service to humanity. And we were living on about $1.50 a day per adult. And that was wearing thin. We weren't planning to be that poor. And some different things happened. We tried to be commercial farmers, and a bad freeze happened and lost $100,000. We didn't use insurance because we felt like it was a ripoff, and we had our own doctors and things. But occasionally, people go to the hospital, and those had run up into some big debts. And finally, Vanderbilt put a lien on our land, and if we didn't resolve that, we were going to lose everything. And so that's basically what precipitated the changeover. Leading up to that, a number of people felt like, Stephen wasn't understanding what we were going through and seeing the need to change. And people felt like it was just not going anywhere and started leaving. And finally, that's when we created the board of directors to try to figure out how to save us financially. And they got to a point where the only thing they could do was put the responsibility back on the members and say, you have to come up with so much money a month, and we're going to be democratic about it. We're going to look at everything in the community, and decide, is that something we can afford? Is that something we're going to pay for? And we're going to vote on it all and then add it up. And that's what it's going to cost you. For example, we had a bakery. It was a beautiful bakery, but home baked bread is a little more expensive than going to the store and buying bread. And nobody had money yet because we hadn't really started working. People had been doing service jobs in the community that weren't bringing in income. I was fortunate in that I saw this coming and had started a business 2 years before the change. And so then when the change happened, instead of turning money into the central bank, I started paying the people that was working for me. And so I had an ongoing business. People who were doing construction work basically did the same thing. They were able to just keep working and got paid. But other people, it took longer. A bunch of people went back to school and got those nursing degrees. Probably about 30 women did that. And can you ask me another question?
Yeah, of course. Um, yeah, I want to speak more about what the change was. Was it, from what you're saying, it sounds like it potentially went from Stephen was sort of running things and had the final say, and it went to more of a cooperative, um, like governance, I guess, once he had stepped down from that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
Okay.
basically true.
And was that something that he was asked to do by the community? How did that conversation and how did that change um progress, I guess, in that time?
Well, by that point, we had created the board of directors.
Okay.
And so they were in charge of, because he never was really in charge of running the day to day operations. We had people that managed the finances and things like that. And he was basically we were all told at a big meeting that from this day forward, this is how it's going to be. And so he got the message along with everybody else. And it was sort of more like he no longer commanded any authority.
Wow. That's a big change. How was that taken?
He stayed back in the woods for about 3 years. And, his home was kind of set off to the side. And I think he kind of sulked for a while and, probably was depressed a little bit. And he would go off the community where he was still recognized as a dynamic speaker and counterculture figure. And that became a part of how he made money,
Sure.
and he would get his energy hit that way.
Perfect.
And at the time of the changeover, 90% of the community did not have running water. We did not have indoor plumbing. We did not have electricity. And so it was a struggle for the first 10 years. People basically I consider it going very internal. You focused on your family, you focused on developing your career, you focused on finishing your house, which maybe he didn't have windows instead of plastic stapled up over a hole, and uh, after about 10 years, we got back on our feet. We paid off the debt in 3 years. The debt was somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million in 1980 dollars. And so we paid that off, and we kind of looked up in the 90s and said, we're still here. We made it. We have something to offer. And so we started doing outreach events, festivals, and things.
That's great. So I'm just taking a look over my notes here. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Can you
What are
refresh me on what this is for again?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I'm volunteering for this organization that Lark is helping run, and the goal is to create some online resources for people that are either looking to create their own intentional communities or looking to join pre-existing ones. So the intention is really to create resources that other people can find and sort of create their own blueprint off of. Um, Whether anyone that's volunteering for this or helping run this will create or join something is like kind of separate from what the mission is. But I personally got involved because I am interested in some type of communal living in that capacity. And I want to learn. I mean, everything you've given me is actually, I hadn't thought of so many of these things, so it's so helpful. But I want to learn what things need to be in order for things to efficiently run for, decades and decades to come, and hopefully to continue passing to future generations as well.
We know there's lots of different levels of community.
Yeah.
We kind of have a very unique, what I would call more of a family, because of 50-year ongoing long-term relationships and friendships. The easiest thing is to do something more like a co-housing, even a rural thing where somebody buys 100 acres and sells off 5-acre pieces to a bunch of people, and then they keep 50 acres as wildland. And maybe they have dinners together, but they may or may not have the level of intimacy, or day-to-day activity, unless they choose to build it in the co-housing style where everyone is living very close together and it creates a lot of interaction. But that can be easier because people are building their own homes, they're buying their own piece of land. We have something like that down the road where somebody's done that.
Hmm. Yeah. Have you, when you were first getting interested in all of this and looking to join something, were you considering alternatives like that where it was a bit less intensive in terms of what you're committing to, or did you just feel excited about it and want to jump right in?
It was way back there. And like I said, we were young. We wanted to change the world. And we were believers in the revolution. And this was it, and we did a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah, the work that you have done and what you've been able to experience in this community, is that what you were thinking it would be, what it would look like, what it would feel like? Or is there anything that you would like to see more of, or that you didn't expect that you really love?
I'd like to see probably more service work, a way to do that kind of work. People feel called on that individually, but it's an important part of someone's spiritual path and helping make you sane. I think the common denominator for us is a love of nature. And we are founded on nonviolence, and there's no weapons allowed in the community. And that's why we're so committed to nonviolent communication uh, and working out our problems. But being surrounded by acres and acres of trees immerses you in a very peaceful vibration.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That about wraps up everything that I had prepared for questions. Is there anything else that you would like to speak on that we haven't touched on, or any questions that you have for me?
I don't think I have any questions, and I guess I've talked enough.
Sure. Yeah, well, thank you. Are there any other communities or resources or individuals that you would recommend someone to go to if they're looking to learn more about ways to get involved in community?
Well, Earth Haven has Diana Christian, and she's written a couple of good books about how to build community. And she does seminars and things on governance, and they're a different model and a good example of somebody to look at and talk to. Dancing Rabbit in Missouri, And, Twin Oaks has been around for a long time. They're kind of a unique model. They still do the income sharing. Some of those Twin Oaks and East Wind that are still doing the income sharing can be an easier way for people who don't have resources to join community.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All
Well,
right.
if anything comes up, give me a shout.
Yeah, I will. Thank you, Douglas. It was great to talk with you, and
Nice
thank
to
you
meet
for
you.
taking the time.
Namaste, y'all.
Okay, have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.